Hello and welcome to the 3AF conference on pilots and controllers UAP experience. We have today an international panel, and let me introduce Chairman of Sigma 2, the UAP Technical Committee of the 3AF, Luc Dini.
Good afternoon, all. It's a pleasure to welcome you in this roundtable. This is the last part of the webinar on UAP technical observables. And we come finally from the technical teams to a more operational environment, since we are very lucky to have part of this panel pilots, civil pilots, military pilots, and also controllers who have, in different conditions, an experience with UAP encounter. Okay, and we are very impatient, of course, to listen briefly your story, your experience, and come to some illustration to cross the experience. And my expectation, if you wish, is to see the interaction between you, getting the bread of your experience about UAP, and maybe bringing some knowledge, some experience to others. You know, that's what expecting. Why? In brief, we have different examples about UAPs that we have already discussed a lot. Experience where we try to figure out, for example, where are the UAPs which are observed by pilot. Okay, why? Because we have radar data. Okay, but the radar data maybe don't have the signature of the UAP. We don't know where it is in this, I would say, the package of radar plots. So we have to do a very, very accurate and long work to try to understand that. And even so, sometimes we see very strange things, very strange tracks, and this is where the experience of others can be very fruitful. That's an example. There will be others. And so I'm going to introduce each of you. Excuse me if I'm doing that very simply, because we want to take profit of the discussion. I will start by Jean-Marc André, who has already participated to the webinar, presented the Channel Island case. And Jean-Marc André is a former fighter pilot from the French Air Force. He was a commander of Command and Control and Detection Center. And he has some experience of UAP, not of encounter by itself, but to summarize things simply, there is a very important case that happened in France. It was on the 9th November 1990, and Jean-Marc at this moment was at the French Air Force staff. He was at the Space Bureau, and he was in interaction with Japan, with Mr. Velasco at the moment. So he has his experience in the context of that time. We have also Captain Ret Bowyer, who is captain in civil transport, and he was an actor, important actor of the Channel Islands case, because he is the one we saw in fact, two UAPs from his aircraft. Observation that was confirmed by another aircraft after that the chief controller of Jersey ATC system asked to other pilots if they were observing something and so on. So I'm not going to tell the details. We will come back to that later, but that's interesting. Then we have also General Bruno Mignot, who is also a retired general from the French Air Force. He has been, in fact, a pilot on fighter, pilot on transport, military transport aircraft, and also he has been a commander of the CNOA, which is the National Center for Air Operations, which is basically the center providing information to Japan in case of UAP sighting and when an investigation is started, and that there are exchange because Japan is a civil structure but working with the Gendarmerie Nationale, with the French Air Force, like Frédéric Courtade explained this morning. So Bruno Mignot was another actor of the event of the 9th November. Why? Because himself was pilot of a Transal on this day, and we had in the aircraft crew, and they all observed a huge, incredible phenomena, and then they stopped the flight, they landed, and they brought information to the gendarmerie. We have also another pilot, Xavier Houdaille. He's a rear admiral. He's retired from the French Navy. He has a long experience as a fighter pilot. And by the way, he has an experience back to 1976, if I'm right. It was in June, and he was flying back from night mission, attack night mission. There were two fighters, and they observed near the coast of Brest, in Brittany, very strange lights that were seen, by the way, by other people on land, including a gendarme on a boat. Well, he will tell the story briefly, but these are different experiences. And now we have also Sean Cahill. Sean Cahill is retired from the US Navy. He was principal, that's a main master in arms, if I'm right. He will correct me if it's needed. And master of arms, I understand that. I don't know exactly the title, but I think he was the actor and the person in charge of a combat system, okay, with radar and so on. So in charge of the operation of the system. He was, I believe he has a link with the Nimitz event. And the point which is very interesting is about his experience of observation, looking at very strange radar tracks, because once more, I'm dreaming of these frog lips tracks and trying to figure out, how familiar it is in case of UAP observation. What is the experience of people who had the nose not through the cockpit in the fighter, in the aircraft, but in the war room, where we have the combat system, we have the scopes, and where people are scrutinizing the scope to find out where is the target, where is the UAP, and so on. So after this short introduction, and so I am with Baptiste Friscourt to moderate this roundtable. I propose to leave a few minutes to each of you to give your story, because I think it's a vivid story. This is important, and then we come into the exchange. So, well, we can do that in the same order, maybe. Jean-Marc, would you like to say a few words about your experience? I'm not telling encounter with a flying saucer. I know the story. It's not the case for you.
I believed it was on and it was out, sorry. Okay, as Luc said, I served as a staff officer in Paris in 1990, and I was in charge of the space military programs. As such, I had been designated as a correspondent for the former Japan with Jean-Pierre or Jean-Paul Velasco. At this time, there was no agreement between the air defense headquarters and the Japan. I was Mr. UFO. So I just can say that this didn't give me too much work. On the 5th of November 1990, 7:00 p.m., I was leaving my office to get back home, and I never heard anything about a special UAP event in the evening. Later, I did not know anything about that. Nobody called me by the phone. I just, the next morning, I just learned about the event by the radio. And in the morning, nobody called me. Nobody in the Air Force seemed to be anxious or worried about what happened. And was there any reason to worry? At this time, not. The phenomenon was not considered for dangerous in terms of air defense. And the Air Force didn't consider it was concerned by the event. So no, there was no reason to call me. I had some contact with Japan. We spoke about the UFO and all the testimonies, but I just consider, me too, that it was a general event which had no importance. It was exciting for the public, that's right, but not for us. It was, which is wondering, surprising, it's a big contrast between the excitement of the public and the Olympian calm of the staffs. And from my own feeling, I never considered that was worth to be taken in consideration as a defense problem. That's how I have seen this event.
I think it's a very good summary. Thank you. And your perception, which is not only your perception, it was your mission as part of air defense. UAP was not a subject by itself. And by the way, I think that today it's slightly different because there is a mission of information or support for investigation, but the UAP subject is not at all a matter of security in France in terms of air defense and so on. It's not.
It was a long time ago, in 51, 54.
90, exactly. It was, I would say, not the beginning, but it's a long time ago. And you are right. The environment changed and the agreement certainly also. Okay, thank you, Jean-Marc. Maybe you can say a few words briefly before Ret Br express himself about the other side of the coin, which is your role and your participation, active participation to Sigma 2, and your perception of the complexity of analysis when you are in the UAP hunting with radar tracks and so on, just to give the feeling. So you have elements, you have data and so on. And in this case, you try to find out, how you can create the relationship between the radar picture and the observation which is made by a pilot and so on. just to give a flavor of the complexity and the questions.
The complexity. My job, it's a game for me. It's a game. I try to make things clear. When you have a testimony, very often it's a visual testimony, and we can't get very few things interesting and very few things objective from a testimony. If I can gather data, numeric data from radars, from videotapes, and so on, you can study, you can investigate, you can make numbers speak, and find something which are very interesting. This is the, sorry, I don't find the word, it doesn't matter. I tried to find a solution. Is it something we can explain, or is it not? If we can, okay, that's good. So the complexity is that when, for example, I had to investigate about the child case, the helicopter, and so on, we didn't have the radar data like in the Jersey case and or in the Aguadilla case. We only had some screenshots, about a dozen, I remember, and the screenshots, you can find figures on the screenshot, but you have big work to do. So you have to look at everything and write down all the numbers you see on the pictures. After that, you can use them as you use the data from the radar files when you have them. This is the first point. It's about the same. You have to exploit the video tapes, because you don't have the tapes on the computer. You have to read them on the pictures, and you have to write down then all the pictures you see. It's a very difficult, not difficult. It's a boring job, because it takes a lot of time, and sometimes you don't see the figures very well. But you have to do that. After, you can process all the lines of data, and you can compute speeds, angles, and so on. And the investigation is easier. But this is the first difficulty. I'll speak about again about the radar. As I said yesterday, when you record data from a radar, that's not what we call the raw data. The raw data is that exactly the return signal from the radar which comes back, and which is very difficult to use for air traffic controller. So this is the reason for which it had to be processed, filtered, so to get the good data, the useful data for the controller. But these useful data from the controller are recorded, but not the first signal. When you have UAP investigation, the data, the recorded data of the flying objects that you know are useful, but you should have something else. We can get again. This is a difficulty. For Jersey, that's the case.
Continue with Bruno Mignot.
Hello, everyone. Very nice to meet you. Nice to be here with you to speak about UAPs. Thanks to the invitation of 3F invitation and my friend Luc Dini. Thank you, Luc. Okay, some words about my what I saw the 5th of November 1990. I was the pilot of a C-160 Transal, a transport aircraft. was on the left seat, therefore at the controls, and my observation of the UAP lasted less than 3 minutes. We were in straight horizontal flight away from the runway at Orleans Air Force Base during a night landing training session on rough terrain, rough strip. We observed traffic at 11:30. We were flying at 1,500 feet, so 500 meters. We observed traffic at 11:30, like a very, very large Boeing 747 taking off right in front of us. But there was no point of turning right because we immediately saw that he flew on our left. We asked the air traffic controller of Orleans Air Force Base what this traffic is doing here, but he didn't see anything on its radar. The controller of the tower came out and observed a series of lights vertically of him. For us, it was traffic. Maybe not for the radar, but for us it was traffic. And it came from our 11:30, 11:02 or 9. And as I was a former fighter pilot, my reflex was to turn left to go to him to it. But during the observation, we saw a series of lights, yellow, red, orange, in a very large shape, like a huge aircraft carrier, very huge, maybe bigger than an American one, which is quite big. It was level, approximately level, maybe just a little bit higher. I was told some years after by Luc, when I was the French Naval commander, that it was the re-entry of in the atmosphere of a second stage of Russian Proton rocket. But I have interrogations. I have two questions which remain. First is that the traffic light left behind something like a trail, like a comet, but it was truncated in the middle, as if the end had been erased with an ink eraser. So could it prove that it was a mass? I don't know. But we had already noticed that the traffic prevented us from seeing the stars in the sky, but it was normal for an atmospheric re-entry. Yes, thank you for the map, Eric. The second question is an object which enters the atmospheres, burns at around 80 kilometers altitude, and we were at 500 meters high. And we saw it quite level. So the explanation that it had been given to me are not enough to think that it was really re-entry. That's it for me. Just to go to what Jean-Marc André said, 2 years ago, or 1 or 2 years ago, I was invited to participate to a YouTube TV broadcasting meeting about UAPs. So as the thing that I'm a general, I have to request to the French Defense Minister cabinet. I am authorized to speak about UAPs on it. I didn't wait too long. The day after, I had the answer, yes, no problem. So from my point of view, it was not an event in 1990, And even in 2020, it is not an event anymore. Not still an event. So it's not interesting for the French political authority.
Yeah, thank you for this comment and explanation about the event. Just to complete, and we will come back to it later. These are some pictures that we put in our report issued in 2021.
Yes.
One on the left is showing the France map with roughly the trajectory of the re-entry, and different observation took place in different areas. There was a lot of confusion because, of course, a lot of people saw things, and there was a strong pressure, of course, on Japan at that time to give explanation and so on. And of course, the observation were in fact, very different, depending on the people, depending on the place. For example, I put the picture on the right part of the screen, which the drawing of one member of your crew, okay? And
yes.
Of course, the different wakes, the points and so on, can suggest possible re-entry phenomena. However, the perception you had also and can be similar to other observations that were made at the same moment. That's the following slide that I'm showing, because we see different shapes. The drawings that you see here are the shapes that were observed in different places. And well, I had the opportunity to have a discussion during another conference with another fighter pilot. He was not flying at the moment, but he was on the ground, and probably what he saw with his colleagues was something similar to one of the drawings that we have on the left. And just to complete once more the diversity of observation, we have information not part of the French files, but the UK MOD files, because they issued a report on UAP. Okay, it was in 2006, and there is one part dedicated to an observation made by Tornado's pilots flying over the channel towards the Netherlands, and they saw exactly at that moment what a big aircraft or craft placed, ahead of their Tornado, same altitude, roughly same velocity, and this aircraft, compared to the Boeing in size, Boeing 707, was surrounded by lights, white lights, and a blue glow at rear, and then it accelerated and disappeared. Okay, so that's very strange. Different phenomena at the same moment, different perception, and so on. So, of course, it can create a lot of confusion and a lot of questions. And I think it's difficult to draw any conclusion, except that, yes, there was a re-entry, that's a fact, but there were other observations which are somewhat different than re-entry. So I would like to continue to continue the tour. So we can continue with Sean. Good afternoon or good morning, Sean. Thank you for being with us. We are interested in your experience, what you saw about UAP. I could summarize in less than 1 minute. The story, as we know, concerning the Nimitz event, it started with an observation you were, or the Nimitz group was under exercise, okay, a naval exercise, and it lasted several days. And the first day, there are observations from the Princeton cruiser with the Spy 1 radar and probably with others of a series of radar tracks, slow tracks, high altitude, and so on. And there was something surprising because this train of radar tracks were moving quickly from high altitude. Their level was something like 80 kilofeet, which is high, with a very slow velocity, and then they were diving in few seconds down to the level of the sea. Okay, so this is something strange. Maybe you will have some comments to do on that, but that's very strange. And by the way, the day after, there was other observation, radar observation, probably the same kind. I don't know, we don't know. But there was F-18 on flight, and at some distance of the Nimitz, it was asked to make a recall on an area where some kind of object named Tic Tac was observed. So the fighter come in the area, and then, well, it's short petrol, so he fly back to the group. Another patrol of F-18 are on the area, and one of the F-18 dive to close the Tic Tac, and this Tic Tac is suddenly moving very fast and disappear. And then later on, a third patrol of F-18 then close the one special point of rendezvous, and then the Tic Tac is there. I think that probably one of the fighter succeeds in locking his radar on the object, maybe. And anyway, there is another point which is very important because it's most famous. One of the fighters was equipped with a FLIR, infrared camera, and is in situation to record, not exactly the image, but the signature, the radiation of this object for quite a while, and this video, this footage will become later on famous. So, could you please tell us your experience with that sort of event about UAP observation maybe with radar? What's strange? What are your comments?
Yes, thank you for having me. In 2004, I was stationed on board the USS Princeton. I was the chief law enforcement officer on board. During the Tic Tac event, I was on the bridge, not in a combat information center, and I was actually directing the movement of the ship in coordination with our exercise. During the course of that week, I worked very closely with Senior Chief Kevin Day, who was the senior radar operator in the Combat Information Center, who was heading up the investigation. He had detected numerous unidentified craft entering the sphere of influence of the battle group at approximately 80,000 feet. And as you said, those objects were seen to appear on the radar at approximately suborbital altitudes and then immediately translate down to approximately 28,000 feet in the vicinity of the Catalina Islands. At which point one of those Tic Tacs would break off from one of those objects, I should say, not calling them Tic Tacs retroactively. One of those objects would then break away from the flotilla and station itself near the battle group as the others made their way south towards what we later determined to be Guadalupe Island. At which point they were lost to the track at a specific coordinate northeast of the island. This occurred over the course of a week. As you said, towards the end of our exercise, aircraft were sorted out. The exercise was stopped and the aircraft were sent out to make a visual identification of these craft, at which point we do have the famous Tic Tac video, and we have the testimony of the pilots stating what they had seen close up when engaging these objects. The evening before The objects were captured on video. I was asked to make a very diligent effort of my lookouts around the ship and myself with our binoculars and our our personal visual system to scan the sky and try to find these objects physically in the sky to correspond with the radar tracks. During that time, I had witnessed personally approximately 7 lights off the port bow of the USS Princeton, all in a very tight constellation. Moving each one at a time would move towards the center of the constellation and then translate away. It would disappear somehow. This didn't match anything that I had ever seen in my previous years at sea and working on the bridge and working in various other warfare areas. I'm very familiar with all manner of aircraft, as many people on this call are, and what I was seeing were not flares or conventional aircraft of any kind that I could explain. After seeing the gun camera footage that was returned to the ship the following morning, we were all rather astonished at what we were involved in. It was very clear that what we were dealing with were real objects on the radar. They were not ghosts in the machine. We had had the radar operators and the Aegis techs break down the system and run diagnostics on it. At that point, it was very strange to us that when we returned to port, that there were no debriefings for the crew. There were no NDAs signed or handed out, and the news was not reporting this. Although the rumors had spread throughout the local area and throughout the fleet, within a very short amount of time, it became a non-event and pretty much everybody got back to work. It wasn't until 2017 with the famous New York Times article that a lot of us decided to start speaking up about the event.
Okay, thank you. This is a very extraordinary experience because during an exercise, observing UAP, conducting interception. By the way, there is something I was interrogative because when reading the executive summary about the Nimitz event, there was one question, and I'm sorry that Xavier Houdaille is not connected because we talked together about the procedure. Maybe they are different in the French Navy, in the US Navy, and so on. But there was one question which just was strange for me because I think it was a question asked to one of the first pilots, so flying to make the reconnaissance to the near the Tic Tac. He was asked whether or not he has ordnance on board, and I was asking myself, it's a usual question or not, because I believe that when the operation plan is prepared, the mission is prepared, we know the configuration of the fighter and so on, weapon or not, and so on. Well, do you have any comment about that?
I really don't. That's not my particular area of expertise, so it would be conjecture on my point. I would agree with you, though, that most of the people involved would have an understanding of the capability of the aircraft before it's sortied. That would include its loadout.
Yeah, and then back to the radar tracks. There is one thing. I'm not playing again with the screen sharing because it's complex today to deal with that. But we have some cases where we observe slow radar tracks, maybe a group of 2, 3, flying, I would say 50 miles an hour, not much, and then disappearing, and then reappearing later on, simultaneously. And that's very strange. And by the way, we are studying one radar track. I don't say that's the same thing, but we are studying one radar track in the case of Jersey, where we have strange groups of radar plots, with what we call the leapfrog, because suddenly they disappear, okay, for a while. And when I say a while, it's not 10 seconds. It can be 1 minute, then they reappear as a group, and they move and they disappear again and so on. Is there any something similar with what you know about the observation, radar observation that was made by the Princeton?
Yes, I recently, in conjunction with a few journalists, was speaking to Kevin Day while we were working up a 20th anniversary article on the event. One of the questions that was asked by one of the journalists was, how many tracks did you see come in over the course of the week? How many craft do you think in total were there? There were approximately 100 craft that Kevin claimed over the course of a week came in from orbit. Now, this is assuming that we didn't see any leave the area of operation, but he said that approximately 10 at a time were entering orbit over and over again and then making their way south. And as you said, they were leapfrogging from orbit down to approximately 28,000 feet in the vicinity of Catalina, and then again leapfrogging very quickly south towards Guadalupe. So there were those in Combat Information Center witnessing those craft make instantaneous or hypersonic translations from one coordinate to another that we don't have any explanation for.
Yes, of course. I understand. Okay. Then moving from the radar environment to, well, with the surface radar, there was a Hawkeye which was on flight around, and we understood that in fact this Tic Tac was seen. There was a visual contact because that was the first contact between the first fighter. Okay, then they used the infrared sensor, so it worked. And then there was an Hawkeye around. So, well, this is a real ideal environment. I mean, for not an experiment because it was not planned, but at least for an observation. You are certainly aware of the other observations that were reported later on in 2015 by other Navy pilots, and it was more on the East Coast, if I remember. And they were mentioning the wording and the description was more like some kind of UAVs. It was the word that was used by the pilots, maybe with the same kind of velocity and so on. What are the main difference in your mind? Because one time we are talking of Tic Tac and hypervelocity, as you said, and at other time we talk of very slow objects flying in altitude, but it's not 80,000 feet. It's more something like 20,000, if I remember. So, what are your comments about that? Is that the similar behavior or really different?
To me, it's very different. They're separated by thousands of miles and different different descriptions. I wouldn't want to conflate the two events, although they're both unidentified. I can't find much to link them. They're wholly different events. As a law enforcement officer, I would not connect the two, other than the fact that they share the word unidentified.
Okay. Thank you. Back to Jean-Marc, and this is of course a very different environment and so on. But what's your feeling regarding what happened with the U.S. Nimitz group, and for example the situation we try to clarify with two objects, and it's not tens of objects, it's one or two, as Captain Bowyer said, and of course it's also different because the equipment used are different. In one case, in Jersey, it's air traffic control radar, secondary and primary. We make the assumption that the secondary is giving an indication about, I would say, normal traffic, okay? And we are searching carefully with the primary radar plots, with all the question marks that you indicated. Well, what would be your remarks or questions?
Voilà. I have one question. With the SPA 1, in 2004 was a new radar. Was it possible to record the detection?
As far as I'm aware, yes, everything was all of the information that's received by those data systems is placed on is taped, for lack of a better word. Those tapes in the course of the investigation are missing. There are dubious reports of personnel arriving on board USS Princeton and USS Nimitz and confiscating these records. I don't have personal verification of that. As the law enforcement officer on board, I would not have been made aware of the comings and goings of aircraft. There should be logs for all of these things, to include watch bills maintained in perpetuity to state who was stationed at what watch station at what time. All of these things are matters of record that are maintained in archives, and all of those archives are currently missing.
Mm-hmm. So I think maybe somebody could replay the event and analyze. But have you any idea of what the result of the investigation?
So far, the result of the investigation, the ones that were done previously, are not very well known. And in fact, Aero, the new UFO overseeing authority that we have here, seem to have completely ignored the Nimitz case, which is very strange, and we're still trying to understand why they did not investigate that case. It seems to be the most well-known, well-documented, and with the most sensor data in the modern era, and yet the newest effort to investigate UFOs wholly ignored that event. So it's a very interesting aspect of this, in my opinion.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a very surprising story. I just saw, excuse me, Sean, I just saw that Xavier Houdaille just connected. Now, Xavier, could you summarize your story about your own observation and come back afterwards on the reaction and the feeling of pilot being confronted to a strange event like a UAP encounter?
Maybe did you introduce me previously? No, I have to.
Yes, well, I introduce you. You can summarize. You will do it better than I.
You said anything, everything. Sorry, it's not necessary for me to say it again. So the event that I saw in the past, it was on the 21st of June in 1976. I was a young pilot at that time, no tactical qualification. I just left the flying training school, the Flying Navy training school, and I was assigned for the first time in my squadron, flotilla. Navy we call that a flotilla. And one evening, just before it was done. We took off during at the end of the day, and the mission was to do a strike mission against a warship. We were two aircraft, two fighters. The leader was an experienced pilot. And I flew at that time an aircraft, a fighter, which was very poor in internal system. Maybe you don't know it. It was the name is Étendard 4 Mike. It looks like the Mirage 3, but inside nothing. No GPS, no inertial system, no navigation system. Everything was done by hand, if I could say. And when we went back to, started from Landivisiau in Brest, in Brittany. When we went back, the night was quite a pitch dark at the time. Very slight horizon. The clouds, it was overcast at that time, and we were maybe at 20 or 30 nautical miles from the coast. I don't know if you know Brittany and Finisterre. We saw at the moment two big lights with very high intensity, very strange, which seemed stuck just above the horizon. We couldn't know exactly the distance between the two lights. Maybe was it the same object? They were on the same object, or maybe it was there were two different objects. We couldn't see it. And I remember my leader asked the traffic controller of the zone if there was any helicopter or other aircraft, and the controller said no, you are alone. So and the thing was moving. It was very surprising. So we went back to Landivisiau. As soon as we started the debriefing, we wanted to know if we saw each other the same thing. So it was a guess. So it was something at least a good point for that. And in the following, the next morning, when we went back to the Naval Air Base, the Flying Navy Air Base, we could read in a newspaper something which was reporting the frightness of sailors, fishing sailors, who was enlightened during a certain time, maybe 10 or 20 minutes, I don't remember. These lights were above them, and that's it for the moment. Sometimes after, we could read in another newspaper that this phenomenon was seen as well by workers strolling around the coast on the western part of Brittany, close to Brest, and they explained that they saw themselves these lights, very high in intensity. It was very curious, and at the moment they heard the sound of aircraft. It is not written, it was a jet aircraft. And when this sound appears, they saw the lights starting moving slowly, very slowly. Then suddenly, the speed increased very high, and they went into the space. When afterwards, when we left the zone and the sound of the jet disappeared, vanished, these lights, these balls came back again, and afterwards, they left, of course, but they came back. It was very surprising. Alors, when we knew that it was only our aircraft, the traffic controller said we were alone in this night, during this night, for this flight, and we decided not to say anything at the time, because we didn't want to be considered as a madman. It was in that time. It was not very nice to put forward this kind of thing. This is briefly explained and what I saw with my leader. So it was very strange, very strange. We never boss, we never talk of that outside from this time, except very recently, thanks to Luc, when he organized a meeting, a meeting. I don't know how what is the name of the meeting you organized with
with the elephants, yes, with the association of air defense people. It was a webinar like this. It was a conference to explain to people we retired from the air defense, so civil and military people. It's an association, and of course, it was the opportunity to present the situation on UAPs, our studies, and what is done by Japan as well, and others. And the reactions were pretty positive, curious, and some of the guys present brought their testimony, explaining that, like you, once they observed something very strange and so on. It was an interesting process. Yes.
That's the story.
Yes, thank you for this story. I would like to come back to the feeling and experience of the pilots when you have observed an UAP, and just share this vision, and also with Sean Cahill, who probably discussed with the fighter pilots after their mission, and certainly they were under emotion or surprise, and that's an interesting part of the story as well. Bruno Mignot, could you summarize your feeling? What happened after the observation when you landed and when you debrief with the gendarmerie?
It was very strange for us to see an European flight like that. Of course, for the first time, it was the last time for us. But we are professional pilots, professional engineers on board, with professional air traffic controllers. So nobody was embarrassed with that, but nobody was became fool after that. I think we didn't write anything on the sheet. We saw UAP, no. But that was not. We asked for the gendarmerie to say something, and they said there is nobody. So come tomorrow. So the day after, we went to the gendarmerie office of the Air Force Base, and we gave our testimony at this time. For us, it was not particularly specific, so it was a non-event, even in the Air Force Base. We knew that it was not quite, as Xavier said already, it was not quite a good thing to see, oh, we have seen a UAPs. Okay, nothing to say, because you will be as a fool who want to be the clown of the squadron. So you don't see anything, you don't say anything, and we didn't speak about that for years until I saw you, Luc, when I was an A commander in 2009. Nobody told me anything about that from 1990 until 1209.
Yes, yes, I understand that, of course, and even if, which is something very important, you deliver a report to the gendarmerie, which is part of the files of GEPAN. I have to say, because when we met, we had a colleague and friend, Alain, who proposed a rendezvous, and we met several times. And I remember listening to your experience. I checked after I went on the GEPAN website and checked on this event the existence of all the reports, and all your reports were saying exactly what you told me. Okay, the drawing was not there. Okay, but all the reports made by each group, were similar and identical to what you said. So since that time, these files was existing, which is remarkable, by the way. Even if there are some difference between reports, there is a huge amount of reports.
Of course, what I said about the truncated trail was said by other people, and we were not in the same room when we. Just after the flight, we came home, and we were not living in the same home. So when we saw the gendarmes the day after, we said the same thing about the truncated trail, which when you have a truncated trail, so you have a mass behind. That's the reason why you don't see the end of the trail. We don't. Nobody said it was a mess. There were a mess. Okay, we saw red, orange, and yellow lights flying at the same speed. Flying at the same speed with a very big side, as you showed the drawing. I have this drawing in my home copy. I made a drawing, but I don't have the copy of the drawing. I don't remember my drawing. We had the same, when I saw the drawing a long time after, I said, yes, it was something like the shape, something, what I saw. And it was a long time after when I thought about, when I had a reflection that there was a problem because of the altitude. I would like to when you see something like here, or even like here. So one case, it is very, very far. Okay. So it's not far, but it's the same level. Okay. Well, if it is a re-entry at the place where you show the arrow, the red arrow on the map, it can't be here. It is here. So I cannot see this UAP at this place, even it's flying on the left at the controls. So there is a problem. There are two problems. The problem of the mass, because of the truncated trail of the comet, something like the trail of the comet, which was given by some lights. As you can show the map, you can see 4 or 5 trails. Okay, I remember 2. I don't remember so many, 5, but there were 2 truncated trails. Okay, first problem. Second problem is the altitude. At this time, we just gave the facts, but we didn't think about it. The day after, it was forgotten. It was forgotten. Okay, that's a long time after when we met, when came back to this to the fact, and I said there are two problems. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Hello, Mr. Mignot. I'm Baptiste
Yes.
Friscourt, during the conference for the debrief. Did you have any training regarding UAPs while you were in the Air Force?
No. Nobody speaks about UAPs, and you won't find anyone writing in a formalized order, written order, like OPO, operational orders. If you see UAP, you have to call back to call this number. Nobody will do that. It is not written. Maybe it's written in 2024, but I could give my hand to say no, it is not written. Okay, so nobody is trained to do that. Nobody is trained to see to perform anything about that. No, for my point of view.
In fact,
Yes,
the people who encounter this kind of events speaks to the others, to their fellows, to their friends, but there is no report, they don't report
No procedures.
this kind of thing. It is not written anywhere, nowhere, and sometimes when I talk of that with friends, I learned that they had also some things like this, and very surprising, but no report, nothing. And,
There is no procedure to report that.
Mm.
Maybe is there in the American Army or Navy, but there is no French procedure.
Yes, maybe Sean has a question to ask to Xavier Houdaille or Bruno Mignot.
I was going to add that until recently, until the last few years in the investigations and congressional hearings that we have had, I'd have to dig in my archives for it, but there was actually a directive to the United States military and Navy specifically, making it crime to actually to report UFOs up in a certain manner. I'd have to pick it up for you, but there was actually disciplinary action would be taken against people reporting UFOs. It's a very strange directive. I'd like to add that while I have not spoken directly to the pilots of the event from the USS Nimitz, I have spoken to most of the crew members involved on the USS Princeton. And I have to say that the day that we witnessed the video, I was with all of the subject matter experts from the Chief Petty Officers mess from each warfare area, from combat systems, fire control, radar, as well as sonar. All of us were watching the video together when it was given to the command crew of the Princeton and the Nimitz via email. We also read through, before we watched the video, a very lengthy email exchange, approximately 30 emails between the operations officers on board the USS Princeton and the USS Nimitz. They had spent the intervening week debunking most of the things that popular ufology has spent time debunking in the last few years, such as temperature inversions, flocks of birds, mylar balloons, etc. I was sitting with the subject matter experts, the people who have spent years in the military honing their skills in technical areas to be chosen as chief petty officers, to then be the guides of the young officers in the Combat Information Center. We all knew that we were looking at an unidentified, non-prosaic craft. We knew that what we were looking at had no control surfaces, had no means of propulsion, was showing exotic flight characteristics without flight surfaces, as I said, without any means of visible propulsion, whether it was on the infrared or through visual means. We were very sure that what we were looking at was non-terrestrial technology. We were at the time all subject matter experts, as I said, in the current state of technology for surface warfare and for air warfare. And what we were looking at was so far beyond what any of us had laid eyes upon It was either a very, very, very deep black program of which the physics outstripped anything that we were aware of, or it was non-terrestrial or non-human in origin. We were quite surprised returning home that none of us had been debriefed, that none of us had received any kind of non-disclosure agreement. Granted, others have come forth and stated that they were forced to sign NDAs. I haven't been able to verify that beyond their oral accounts of those things. As I've mentioned, the records are missing for the event.
Mr. Cahill, as you were talking, was there unrest among the crew after the sightings?
There was a great deal of excitement. It wasn't just confined to those of us on the bridge in the Combat Information Center. The rumor mill on the ship gets around. It's a crew of only approximately 400. Everyone knows each other. We eat together and we play together, essentially. So it was the topic of conversation for the days in and around the event. We were all astonished, but we were more astonished that nothing came of the event. And most of us, we say that we just went back to work. As many of the gentlemen have stated earlier, it doesn't make you popular in the military to mention UFOs, and it does not benefit your career until recently to say that you have witnessed a UFO of some kind.
And I have a question about the change of procedure concerning the reporting of UAP observation. Because if I'm right, last year, there was a decision made by Pentagon to transmit orders via the US forces everywhere to apply procedure in case of UAP observation, not observation of aircraft, but specifically there is a procedure which has been activated. I don't remember the name, but it's the specific messages to report and describe any observation of UAP around the world. And this is something which was decided last year. EADMIN, I think it's the name, if I remember. So it means there is a change of procedure, even though possibly there is also maybe a protection of information, because in the old past there were some procedure already, GRIC and so on, in the Navy, in the Air Force and so on, where people were asked. It was not only pilots but also captain on boats to make a reporting of any sighting of aircraft, missile, UFO, and so on. It was in the older time. It started in the 50s.
It's a GENADMIN message from the Chief of Staff.
Yes, GENADMIN message, yes. So, well, it means that there is a concern to have reports, but clearly the situation is not so comfortable. Maybe
not publicly. It was,
yes.
We were saying that directly.
Yes, it's part of the change, the progressive change in mind with aero and so on. Even if, and that's true on our side, the Nimitz story is known on the planet, the whole planet, clearly. And at the same time, after mentioning hundreds of UAP cases, because this is part of the statistics gathered by the Aero, we never saw really a report specifically on the Nimitz case. We have the executive summary. There are some pages, but not a scheme, nothing. At least it could have been a report issued, part of the report issued by Aero, or before that the UAP task force since 2029, and it never happened, never. And however, this is the iconic case, if I may use the word. Is Ret Br still connected?
Mr. Cahill, a carrier strike group is a strategic asset of the US defense. Does the lack of response from your superiors make sense in any way at the time?
I have to say that at the time, though I don't feel this way anymore, my observation of events and the reaction of the chain of command, specifically my commanding officer, who was very senior, a very senior captain in the twilight of his career, he had reached what we call terminal pay grade. He was not going to make admiral, so he didn't have a lot to be afraid of, and he was not concerned whatsoever, it seemed, with this event. He was neither excited, perturbed, nor bothered by it. I have to say that at the time, due to the response of my chain of command, I believed that we must have encountered some kind of DARPA project or something like that. In the intervening years, I've changed my opinions on that just based on the fact that we don't mix training and we don't mix active battle group training and testing of equipment together. We don't perform what are called red cell operations, of blue on blue operations to test each other. Those things have proved catastrophic in the past. And it seemed while a young chief petty officer in my early 30s, I thought that, well, this must be one of ours and I'm not going to worry about it. I think that was more for my own peace of mind and sanity than anything else. In the intervening years, it's very clear to me that whatever was going on, there must have been some kind of knowledge by the upper chain of command in some way, due to the way that it's alleged that personnel responded to the event, arrived on scene, and confiscated the records. It seems that must have happened because the records are missing. Everything is missing. Even the smallest details are missing from the archives. But at this point, it just, as we've stated, the fact that Aero did completely ignored what is essentially the easiest to investigate case that exists, added to the way that our chain of command responded, and the way that other entities responded if these things were confiscated. I still don't believe that we were dealing with a blue on blue situation, but I do believe that there were entities in play within the United States Defense Department that did have some kind of knowledge that this event was occurring or does occur in the way that they responded to it. It's still very dubious. Those are just my personal conclusions, but I do not believe that it was an advanced research project of ours that we were bumping into that would have been catastrophic to place a multi-billion-dollar battle group with thousands of sailors in harm's way of a testing of some kind of advanced project like that. So I still believe that this was a non-human event, for lack of a better word. The question is still, are we protecting the systems that detected this object and the classified systems and methods that may have detected it? Are we protecting the event itself? If we were merely just protecting the systems and methods that were used to collect it, that could easily be sanitized and the reports could be made to the public. I don't understand why it's being ignored. I think that it's something that here in the United States we need to take very seriously and put pressure on Aero to explain why they ignored this case.
I have a question coming back in my mind. There is something which is surprising because, well, the group was not so far away from the US West Coast, from San Diego. How can you explain that we never heard about any Air Force fighter committed to make a reconnaissance in this area? Because probably the observation, and it lasted hours and days, this observation was probably information transmitted to NORAD. The air defense radars were active, so with objects flying at such altitude, they were certainly visible. And I always ask myself why there was no no F-16 patrol sent on site. It looks like the battle group is in the ocean, you know, not close to the border, not close to the coast, and normally, and 3 years after September 11, you know, there was a lot of stress about the airspace security and so on. But
well, I have to say that that during that week, during November 14 to 17, the battle group and the aircraft carrier would have been the most likely and best asset to place on that target at that time. Any Air Force assets would have been much farther away on land. But however, we're not privy to any of the follow-on investigations that may have been put in place. But you are correct in that situation reports, mishap reports were submitted. All of this information in real time was on the data link that was going back to NORAD. So the only conclusions that I can make are that entities of the Air Force are possibly, and this is conjecture on my part, but possibly responsible for the confiscation of the radar tapes, etc., that is alleged to have occurred. As I say, that's pure conjecture on my point, but it would seem to follow that they would have been the ones with the best information to respond in such a manner. Those of us in the battle group were merely concerned with our safety, the safety of the area of operations that we were in, and frankly, determining what these targets were they a problem to our exercise, and can we return to the exercise? That's how it went for us at the battle group. But you are correct that if there was some kind of fouling of a range of a aircraft carrier's battle group, especially a hot range that we were in, it's very strange that no follow-on investigation was made. If I may add, in the course of filming a television show for the History Channel, I was fortunate enough to make an expedition down to Guadalupe Island and interview the indigenous fishermen that are there. There are only a handful of people that live on the island, a few scientists at the north end that study sharks and the habitat, and approximately 80 indigenous Mexican nationals that live on the island. Only a handful of them were willing to come forward and speak to us on camera, but they brought practically all of the senior men and women from the village out to support the people that did speak on camera. All of them were of the same experience, that they have been seeing all manner of shapes, sizes, and configuration of UAP with exotic lights entering and exiting the water in and around the island. It's something that's known to all of the fishermen. I know many of us are familiar with a smaller shape that some of us call silver basketballs or silver spheres. They claimed on a very, very on almost a daily basis, a weekly basis, while out checking their traps, especially at dawn and at dusk, of seeing these small silver spheres rise from the water, dart around their fishing vessels, and then move off in a direction at great speed. I have to say that as a law enforcement officer with 20 years investigating crimes and working in anti-terrorism, that I was taking the personal accounts of people who had witnessed something very profound and something very moving that they did not understand. I still struggle myself to wrap my head around the Tic Tac event in regards to the accounts of the fishermen, but it has set me on a path to make this my career of investigation and for the remainder of my life. It's fascinating to me that this is occurring mere miles off the coast away from my home right now. I can tell you that while we're not receiving a great deal of official reports from the United States Navy, that what we call the rumor mill, or the network of family members, wives, husbands, etc., that are left on shore, are well aware that our battle groups are still encountering UAP off the coast. It's just not being reported in the news.
Okay. To further your point, was the, well, let's call it the phenomenon, was the phenomenon culturally embedded inside the population of Guadalupe Island, or was it recent to them too?
That's an excellent question. We had also interviewed the president of the Fishermen's Association in on shore where they all originated. That's how we were associated with the people on the island. These accounts go back to their grandfather's times, their great-grandfather's times. They'd fished these grounds for approximately 100, 150 years, most of these families. And the stories extend all the way back as far as they can remember.
Thank you very much. I have a question in two parts, but it's my interpretation. How did your military mind react to the lights you saw during the Nimitz events, and how your human mind reacted to it?
It's a very hard thing for me to explain. One would think that immediately after seeing those lights, I would have made reports on them and that I would have taken it very seriously as we were days into this. But for some reason, immediately after seeing them, it didn't seem very important to me. I went to call Senior Chief Day in the Combat Information Center, but we were on overlapping watches. His ended prior to mine ending. And I just realized he had gone to bed. Maybe I'd talk to him in the morning. I didn't think that the young officer that was sitting at his desk at that time would be interested in what I had to say. I thought this was something we were going to kind of keep between us, if that makes sense, and make reports directly to each other. So the next morning was when I viewed the video. It had been taken and processed and sent over while I had been asleep. The whole thing's very strange for me. It doesn't make sense to me the way that I responded. I should have taken it more seriously, and I didn't. We had taken everything seriously up until that point. I was fascinated by what I saw, but I was also fascinated by the fact that no one else on the bridge really seemed to care. The lookout that I was with at the time was as astonished, but we all just kind of got back to work. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Do you think it's by habit? You had a mission to do, you had something to do, so you just left it aside, and then it get back to you 15 years later?
The most logical explanation that I can come up with is I just got back to work because we did have days more of an exercise to do, and I had many other things on my plate. I was the law enforcement officer on board. I was the urinalysis officer. I remember during that cruise, I was having to also obtain urine samples from a large portion of the crew for regular drug testing. I also had to do things like inspect the cleanliness of the berthings on the ship and the eating areas and make patrols of the ship. So there were a lot of things that at any given time, there was always something to do. So I think a lot of it was just shelving this exotic event and getting back to the routine that we needed to complete. But there was never any real follow-up on this exotic event. There was nothing. And when I returned to shore, there was rumor and conjecture. I spoke to the spouse of a security officer on board the USS Nimitz, who had stated that they had been ordered to sequester the pilots in their staterooms until persons in civilian attire arrived on board the ship to debrief them. But I've not been able to verify that in any way. But that was a report that I received within 4 days of returning to shore after the event. It seemed that some kind of noose came down around the event and tightened very quickly, got the information that it needed to, squashed the event, as we would say, and that most of us moved on. We're very lucky that Kevin Day committed all of this information to paper shortly afterward. As he said to me recently, if not for Luis Elizondo and Christopher Mellon and the 2017 article, etc., we may never have known about Tic Tac if not for his notes and the records that he kept.
Thank you very much. Geoffrey, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. Sean, you just said that the crew on your ship didn't care about this object. But my question is, if these objects that you track on your radar and you saw with your own eyes had another shape, like typically an aircraft shape, do you think your crew would have reacted differently? And your
I think-
commander would have chased it?
Yes, I think absolutely. Had it been a prosaic aircraft or that of a civilian entity or another country, we would have taken it very seriously. It would have been it would have stopped all training immediately if we had had an unidentified aircraft in our battle group area. It would have been a very large faux pas to continue to train when there were possibly civilians or other military in the area. We would have stopped all training. I think that the fact that it was a UFO, for lack of a better term, made it something that people were easy to dismiss. You find that most people consider themselves experts in the areas of their own reality. And so many people will immediately tell you, well, I know what that is. That's either a balloon or a bird or something else. To be honest, it didn't make a lot of sense. It wasn't something that the whole crew knew about. So I can say that they were excited when it comes to the rumor of a UFO around us, but you can imagine the amount of people that would have laughed at that or discredited people who were interested in it or who spoke on it. The chain of command spent only a moment at our intelligence briefing in the evening, and speaking about the event, and all that was said was, well, we had a very interesting week. Now it's time to get back to work.
Okay, so so everything is about the shape. No matter the flight characteristics, everything is about the shape, right? Okay,
Yes.
If you found an aircraft which have exactly the same characteristics, you would have chased it to try to know who is in our sky, you know. So
I think too many people were willing to dismiss the shape due to the fact that it could have been in their mind it logically resembled a balloon, a dirigible, something of that nature, and therefore to them it could not be a threat. I think it's very silly. It's a very interesting psychology.
Yeah, incredible. Okay, thank you.
I have a question about what you saw with your eyes. It's a technical question, if you wish, because we saw, of course, description of the Tic Tac, white without, any navigation device that you can see and so on. Okay. Yes, and we have information also in the NASA report. However, with your eyes, when you said you saw lights. It was at night, so it was a bright object, because this is something which is not described, in fact, by the observation from the F-18. How would you describe your perception? It was a light. There was flashes, and just to understand what was the appearance.
There were approximately 7 lights. All of them were white, very bright lights, approximately the same luminosity, if not more, of Venus. There was no pulsing. There were no navigational lights. There were no colored lights. There was no oscillation of the luminosity. It was steady, very bright, and they were. As was mentioned earlier, there's no way to tell how close they all were to each other. There was merely my perspective in a 3D space of these 7 lights, but they were all of relatively equal luminosity, so I believe that they were in company with each other. They were in a very tight formation. From my perspective, I always hold my hand out like this because it looked like a handful of stars at arm's reach. Each of them, as they were kind of moving slowly in a counterclockwise fashion, and one of them seemed to go towards the center and it would disappear, and then the next one would break off and go towards the center and disappear. There was no discernible flash. There was no modal change that I could note. Just merely moving, as I said, moving towards the center of mass of the group and then disappearing. Again, it made no sense. I had literally, within that week, conducted flare training with a group of people that were signing off their watch qualifications. If you're going to stand watch on the bridge, you have to be familiar with all manner of signal flares in case someone falls overboard, if we're in an exercise and need to indicate that there's a submarine, all kinds of reasons to fire a flare. And so you have to fire each of these flares to become familiar with them, whether they're pencil flares, which are very small, like a pen or a pencil, or a full, what people are regularly see in the movies. These were assuredly not flares. There were no smoke trails. These were not aircraft. There were no navigational beacons. They were just steady, very bright white lights.
Thank you.
And in your law officer experience, do you correlate the two events? Because they are visually very different in kinetics too. So do you think they are related to each other, or it's two different events that just happened at the same time?
I have to say that my perception now is colored by the years and by my investigations post career into UAP. At the time, as a law enforcement officer, if you were to have asked me to summarize the events of the week, I would have made sure that the chain of command understood that we should not conflate the two events, due to the fact that I could discern no shape whatsoever. Technically, we could not discern any exotic, as are called, the 5 observables. These were mere, as I would have made sure that my report stated that these were merely solid color lights. I would have to say that there is no way other than proximity of event to link the two, due to the lack of shape and the lack of corresponding radar track to the things that I saw. Now, if the radar tapes, for lack of a better word, were still available, we could track the time and date back and see if the orientation of the ship corresponds to radar tracks and my visual account. But it's very hard to connect them other than by the general vicinity of events. I will be the first one to say that those 7 lights could have been anything. They're just not familiar to me in my entire career.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Ray, you just appear on the screen. Happy to hear. Of course, we have already exchanged a lot of things. However, we would like to hear you about the description of what you saw from your aircraft, and what happened, the way you reacted, your perception. We have the drawing that you made, afterwards, but Paul Kelly, the chief controller, made a drawing listening to your description. So
Yeah.
could you describe the circumstances of your observation?
Of course. I hope you can hear me well. Can you hear me?
Clear.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yes.
All right. That's good. I was flying a Trilander aircraft, which is it's a light aircraft, really. It's only about 5 tons, 3 engines. And I'd successfully completed the flights from Albany to Southampton. On the way back from Southampton to Albany, I noted a bright light ahead, a very bright light, and I thought it was a reflection from a greenhouse or glass roof, but it stayed there for quite a couple of minutes. I've just got to cancel this off of my screen. But the light stayed in the same place, so continued towards it, and I mentioned this to Jersey Air Traffic Control, and they said they had nothing on radar. So I was continuing towards this light, very bright light, and obviously getting closer to it. I assumed initially that I was about 7 miles away, and that this was the size, this object was the size of a 737 type aircraft. But after another 3 or 4 minutes, which would have been 8 miles, I was still a long way away from it. The controller, then I asked him if he could see anything. He did say he had some anaprop at high level off to my left, and I was flying roughly south. But that was the only thing he could see. But then he said he would take off his filters of the radar and check again what was visible. And he said, yes, he did have a contact, but it was more like 45 miles away from where I was, which was over the between Cascat's Lighthouse and the north coast of Guernsey. Anyway, I'm continuing towards this thing. I'm using binoculars to look at the object, so I got a very good close-up view of it. And it appeared to be about a 15:1 sort of aspect ratio, 15 long and 1 high, very sharp pointed ends. And around 2/3 the way along this, if you can call it a fuselage, we don't know, there was a dark band at an angle. And the interface between the brilliant yellow and the dark band was sparkling lights up and down the interface between the bright yellow and the dark area. And I'd say it was the dark area was around about 20 degrees or 30 degrees from the level of the UFO. Anyway, I'm continuing towards this, and now binoculars aren't required to see it. And at that point, a second one appeared much further away, and it had I'd gone closer to the second one, which was further south, and it came above the haze layer, or I could see down on top of the haze layer to make this second visual, second UAP visual, and continuing towards it again, getting very close. My passengers in the aircraft started to see the object, the closest one. And then as I understood later, an aircraft that was flying from the Isle of Man into Jersey, looking in his 7 o'clock right behind him over this way, he could see the northernmost object as well, which he didn't report, but he did make a radio comment about it. Eventually, it was my turn to descend and go through the haze layer. And I think I'd been in contact with it for about 14 to 15 minutes in total. Once again, like your previous correspondent just said, it's 17 years ago now. So things are a little bit hazy, but it's still very much in the front of my mind. And after 14 minutes, I landed. I asked anybody on the aircraft if they thought they'd seen anything unusual. And a couple of people did come forward and said what they saw. And I went immediately into my operations department and wrote very quickly with a descriptive note and a picture of what I'd seen and sent that off to Jersey. And it was at that time I had to get back into the aircraft and continued back to Southampton again as a second schedule that day. So that was a very brief history of it. And if there's any questions you might like to answer, I'll try my best.
Okay, thank you. Is there any question?
Did you consider it as a flight risk, or was it just something unusual for you?
Yes, I did consider it as a flight risk, but only when I first saw the northernmost object, it was 55 miles away. So it's big. And I've flown at night all over the world, and you can see a city a long way away. When it's a clear night, you can see the sort of shape on the ground of a city. It was similar to that, but in the middle of the day. At night time, you can see the lights on the ground of the city. But in the daytime, I've never seen anything like that.
So what was the logic behind the decision of considering at first as a flight risk? Was it just because it's something in my airspace?
When I went, after that flight landed, I was due to go to Southampton again, and the exact flight path I would have taken, it would have been very, very, very close to the UFO. So that okay. I didn't have any worries. You don't know. Is this thing going to move really fast? Is it going to do 2,000 miles an hour? Is it going to do 10 miles an hour? or knots. I just wanted to get on the ground, but I was quite worried on the third departure of the day that it may still be in the same place as it was, which was very close to where my flight path would have taken it. And from below the haze layer, I couldn't see the UFO from below. I can see it from above at 4,000 feet, but I couldn't see it from underneath the haze layer. So I couldn't see if there was anything in the way when I took off again for Southampton. So yes, a flight risk, definitely. And at that time, this was in Class A controlled airspace. So it's the highest qualification, 5 miles all around, 1,000 feet above and below the aircraft. And I couldn't guarantee that. So I was very cautious on my takeoff from Alderney to Southampton on the third rotation.
And was there any activity from the RAF?
They were contacted, but they said there was no threat to UK airspace. So we had two objects at least a mile long in Class 1 controlled airspace, but that apparently is not a threat.
But they were aware of it beforehand, before you told them?
Can you repeat, please?
Did they told you that after you made a report?
Yes.
Or did they immediately told you, we know it's not a flight risk?
They said that there was no threat to UK airspace. They didn't say about the risk of a threat to the aircraft or anything like that. It's just that these two enormous objects were in the most confined airspace in the world. And I wouldn't have thought that was a normal operating procedure. I would have thought that if anyone knew about this area being Class A controlled airspace, they do experiments anywhere else, but in controlled airspace. And also the radar tracks, which I think you've got most of them. And Luc Dini has certainly got the radar tracks. It confirmed the whole incident really as being two tangible objects airborne.
I'm insisting because I want to be sure I have it right for the article.
Mm-hmm.
Made a report to the RAF.
No, I reported to Jersey. And Jersey sent out they had to communicate with the Ministry of Defence. I didn't do that, and it was only some days after that it was confirmed that there was no threat to UK airspace.
Some days later.
Yes. In fact, if you can just forgive me for 10 seconds, I'll get the email. Excuse me.
Sure.
That's interesting.
That's astonishing. Can you imagine near Charles de Gaulle, Ministry of Defense, taking 2 days to tell you that's nothing?
Yes, but I think that we have one case which is I won't say similar, but yes. If you take the story of Duboc is somewhere strange because there is a reporting to the ATC. The ATC says, "Oh, we don't see anything." Okay. There is a supposed exchange of information between ATC and the Air Operation Center, and where there was a radar track. The radar track, neither the captain or the flight officer never heard about that. They heard about that 3 years later. So there was no threat, no air threat considered by the Air Operation Center, and there was no risk like air miss, except that the trajectory was pretty close, as we see afterwards, but there was no risk. Yes, okay.
Shall I read you the email?
Yes, sure, please.
It's dated the 30th of April 2007 at 1700 hours. The position reported is outside of the UK radar coverage and is in fact inside French airspace for air defence. We had no reports from the French that the object was seen or detected on radar. We believe the ATC radar at Jersey is secondary only, well it isn't, and therefore unable to achieve a primary radar contact, which it did achieve a primary radar contact. The contact was reported as stationary, again making radar detection unlikely and no threat to the UK from this observation, and we will not be taking the investigation further. And that's signed. Well, you can see it. You can see that there. There is.
Thank you very much.
Oh,
There is the text. So the British Royal Air Force and the French Air Force weren't interested in proceeding further with any investigation.
As far as I remember, there was a question that has been asked. It was at the time Mr. Patney was in charge. It's mentioned in the report from Clark and others.
Yeah.
And he asked if there was any information, and the answer was no, there is no information. So that's it. And by the way, there is a question mark about the coverage of the area. But from the UK position, it's we are in 2007. The report from UK MOD was issued in 2006. And the content is, yes, there are phenomena difficult to explain and so on, but they are not a threat for UK airspace. That's the conclusion of their report. So they are logical with what they wrote. And by the way, it was something they didn't see with the radar. It was slow, so no threat. That's it.
Okay. Well, the interesting thing is that if I think it's 21:30 hours, so 9:30 in the evening, then the whole airspace converts back to French airspace. But between 6 a.m. 0600 to 21:30, below 19,500 feet, it is all UK airspace. It is not French at all, unless it's above 19,000, well, flight level 195. So anything below that, before 9:30 in the evening, is considered UK Class 1 airspace. So what this text is actually saying is not true. It's a lie.
Okay. Well, is there any other question or question from pilot to pilot and so on? Because we try to orchestrate, but you may have a question. We have incredible debate. Really very interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Maybe a last question to all of you. If this happened to you today, knowing what you now know, knowing what's happening, investigations or work on the topic by Aero in the US and some others, would you behave differently, or what would you do?
I wish my airplane was empty, because I would have wanted to land on top of it.
Okay.
And that would prove that I was doing 10 knots. Obviously the aircraft can't fly at that speed, so that would be one thing. However, I had I think 10 passengers, so I wasn't able to do that. But yeah, on reflection, I would like to have got a lot closer and possibly landed on the top if it was solid. We don't know.
All right.
If I were to have all of the historical and institutional knowledge that I possess now in 2004, I would not have been quiet in my career, nor would I have been quiet as soon as I retired. I believe that I would have been an advocate immediately. I had a lack of understanding of the the history of the investigation surrounding UAP, how far it extends back, and how much it has been actively covered up by, for lack of a better word, governments and defense departments over the years.
Yeah.
It's very clear that there is an international Five Eyes investigation that has occurred, that there has been governmental involvement, there has been policy made. The public is not privy to those things. We have no understanding of this phenomenon in an official capacity, and we are left in the dark and gaslit by that effort. So I would have become a much more vocal advocate, and do not intend to back down from this subject at this point.
Thank you. Correct. So.
And Sean, to that point, in UK, especially in Class 1 airspace, it is the law that you report these objects. There's no I might do it, I might not do it. It's the law, it's air law. That if you see anything, now I believe this is very different in the US. I mean, taking the Chicago O'Hare incident where this thing just took off and went through the clouds and made a hole in the clouds, and no one was allowed to speak about it by their airlines. It was a job, it was a career-ending conversation that you would have had if you talked to anybody about it. It's very different in the UK.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Is there any comment, question from Bruno, Xavier, Jean-Marc?
I have a question for you, Mr. André. Is there a specific signature in primary radar data you are looking for to detect a true UAP, if we can say that? Or do you need to reconstruct the whole scene each time?
I understand you asked me if there are special signatures.
Yes.
Yeah. As soon as we have on the screens plots, the plots are all the same. And we have no signature of the plots. We should, the controller should display the raw detection if you want to see a special signature. I think Sean is agree with that, but so
Yes,
no,
yeah.
no, I don't expect to see a special signature.
Even if a craft is a mile long, you will only see one dot.
But it's not a signature, it's a pattern. In this case, it's exactly what Jean-Marc is doing right now.
Yeah.
Looking at the suite of plots, creating a pattern, and the question mark is it a plot which is moving, or do we have an alignment with a static, reflection from a different part of an object? That's exactly what we try to analyze. But you don't have any assumption at the beginning. You try just to figure out what's the suite of plots is meaning. It's the same question for the famous frog lips. You have a suite of plots, then you have a hole, then you have again. So what is happening? It's disappearing. It's jumping. It's what's happening? We don't know.
Yes,
and this is where
the frog lips track, we could have called it also the Loch Ness monster track, because we can imagine the animal is coming out from the sea, jumping and sinking again. But that's the problem when we analyze, when we investigate all these things, is to try to understand something for what we don't have all the figures, all the information.
Can I add to that?
In primary detection, we have no idea of the altitude of what we detect.
Yeah.
And we cannot know. We try to know, but it's difficult if the disappearance of the object is due to the low altitude or something else. Something is turning on itself. So it cannot be detected anymore.
Yes, we don't know. We don't know the shape. We don't know the radar cross section. Don't know if there is a self motion. So imagine that you have a slow rotation, you know, and during a while it's bright, you know, and during a while it's below the threshold of detection. So we don't know. Yeah. That's different assumptions we have to make. Question or remark from who?
It's Ray Bowyer. On the radar reflection, when I spoke to the radar technician in Jersey, on one rotation of the radar head, he told me that there were 3 reflections to and from the same object in the same sweep. And that's how he imagined that it's at least a mile long.
Yes, it's exactly what Paul Kelly told me. I met him. That's what we try without favoring one track or another, because to answer to Baptiste, we are not putting aside things. We try to have a rational in terms of analysis, matching your visual observation and the radar tracks. But I remember clearly what Paul Kelly said. He was amazed, but he told me it's just like you had a stack of returns. He didn't say 3 or 4, or I don't remember, but he said, and it looks like there is it's an object with a 700 meters long, you know, that's what he said. But we try to pick up, you know, plots after plots and try to see if something is happening.
We should investigate more on this case, because on the records, it's not possible to find that again. So
well, you do have the tapes.
The controller.
You do have the tapes, the radar tapes.
So
you should be able to find this sweep, the single sweep, where it hit the UFO 3 times on the same sweep as it went past it. So
yes, why not?
And that was 20 miles away from the radar head. And I think he said it was 20,000 hertz the radar transmitted at. 20,000 hertz. I can't remember. But he said with that calculation, it means that those 3 hits on the same object, on the same reflection, made it at least a mile long.
That's interesting. But we have no more information about that.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, Xavier, you wanted to say something?
No, unfortunately, my microphone was off when I was talking, so I noticed that. No, I wanted just to say that it was very interesting. Unfortunately, I'm sorry, I have come late because of a misunderstanding regarding the starting time of the roundtable. So I missed the beginning of your debate. It's unfortunate for me, but really I learned a certain number of things, and it was for that very interesting. Thank you very much.
I have a question for you. So the specificity of your testimony is that you were coming back from a strike mission. So how did you consider the lights when you saw them on your path?
You know, when my leader and myself saw this kind of thing, of course, it was so different from what we were used to see. It was not the light of a lighthouse. I mean, inbound, we were inbound the coast, close to Palmar. I don't know if you know a bit the geography of Brittany. And when we saw it, it was so tough, so huge light. We were very astonished. So finally, we don't talk during the flight, except if a big problem. As we were at low altitude, 500 feet at that time, and more than 400 knots, and the gas was very low, so we needed in any case to continue our trip for landing, and my leader didn't try to go to the right to check what it could be. It was impossible for us to know what it was, but when the controller told us that we were alone in the area, so it was adding some surprise, some astonishment. And that's why when we landed, the first thing we asked each other is, did you see that? Did you see the same thing? Do we have seen the same thing? But we had no response for that. And we seemed at the moment to have a kind of a vision, curious vision, but without any certainty that it was real. And when we read in the morning the newspaper, we read this the remarks and the article, the newspaper article. So we were aware that it was not a vision like this, but we didn't have, we didn't want to talk of that in the squadron. And so we stayed during 40 years, for 40 years, speaking of that each time we meet. Sometimes there is a ceremony in Landivisiau in the Naval Air Base, but we were alone, and we didn't want to talk of that. I don't know if I replied to your question.
Yes,
but,
yes, absolutely. I have one question left for everybody. I think I have the answer, but I need to hear it from you all. Do you all agree that UAP training should be part of mandatory training of every carrier involved with aviation? Should civilian military pilots, ATCs, be trained to respond to the presence of UAPs in their training, basic training?
No training for that. I'm sorry.
Let's go in order. Mr. André.
Okay.
We don't hear you.
Okay, sorry, I didn't listen to you. Can you repeat?
Do you agree that UAP should be a matter of at least a lesson in training for pilots, ATCs, aviation personnel?
Personally, I don't think so. I don't think so. If the subject is important enough, yes. But for the moment, it's just interesting. We try to know. Everybody is investigating. That's good. But having a special training, you speak about the you speak for the crews. Yes. Okay. Did you see a Top Gun?
Not the last one.
Did you see Top Gun? do you can understand a lot of things that you have to do in an aircraft? How fast things are going. So certainly a training should be the things better, but I don't think it's worth the training.
Okay, thank you.
I think if I can add something, I think
Yes.
it's not considered as a huge topic. In any case, in Fly Navy, I don't know in the French Air Force, but we never talk about that. Never. And I guess some pilots nowadays met maybe this kind of thing, but they don't say anything. There is no report. It is like this, unfortunately.
I would like to make a remark about this question, or two remarks. First thing, I have in mind that in France and Japan certainly could confirm that they plan to have, and they did, I think, some training course at ENAC, at least for controllers,
Yeah.
just to explain, the existence of UAPs and so on, without emphasizing on UFOs, that sort of things, but explaining that it's existing. Second point, as far as I remember, I saw the manual, what we call MIAM, which is for the military pilots, but related to the air traffic and that sort of things. And I remember there is a paragraph dedicated to PAN, UAP. So maybe it could be, some recommendation. And the UK Ministry of Defense report on UAP didn't say a lot of things, except that concerning pilots, there was a recommendation. They accepted the fact that UAPs can happen, and a recommendation to maintain, their flight smooth, no overreact to what is happening, and so on. It can be part of a training, in case of emergency, and reporting, which is the other thing. The incitation, to report any observation, so that it can help then any investigation if needed, for sure.
If I may, I worked in anti-terrorism as a first responder in numerous areas and in conflicts. I have to say that this investigation is over 100 years old with the American government. It has been debunked, it has been obfuscated, and it has been pushed to the side. While I think that it would be, we would be remiss if we were to try to train people on understanding UFOs, I think that the historical aspects of the national security piece of this are very important, and they're ignored on a daily basis with crew members and aircraft crew and with crew of vessels at sea. They need to be taught to take this seriously. The United States government takes it seriously as a national security threat. It's just not a public national security threat. At this point, we're having open conversations in Congress, and even more serious conversations behind closed doors in regards to the more esoteric aspects of crash retrieval, reverse engineering, and biological evidence. These things are a reality. They are occurring. These conversations are occurring at the highest levels in SCIFs and behind closed doors in our legislature. I think we have made a great mistake by telling our people in the field and our people on the front lines that this is something they don't have to pay attention to. I think that what we're dealing with is the fact that there is no government entity or power structure that wishes to explain what they know about this. The information is kept at the highest levels, but it's something that the people that are in the field that are dealing with this, as evidenced by Ryan Graves' work in aircraft safety, we are encountering these things in the field. If they are not known actors or allied governments, then they are national security threats to those who are encountering them. And until we understand the origin and intent of these craft and or their pilots, if they exist, it's something that I think needs to be much more educated amongst our military and our civilian responders.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Bowyer?
I think that our governments collectively all around the world know exactly what these craft are. And they don't want to talk about it because I think they're working in collaboration with the governments. That's my feeling.
Do you agree aviation personnel should be trained about UAV?
Yes, that's a good idea. I don't think it has to be in depth because every sighting seems to me to be different. There's no specific type of UFO sighting. It's very different. It happens at all different times of the day and night. But I think in the respect of my particular sighting, the air traffic controller did exactly the right thing. He removed the filters and he actually contacted the relevant military operators. And I think he did what he was supposed to do. And I think with general, it doesn't have to be in depth, as I said, but I think generally speaking, if there were maybe, I don't know, 1 or 2 hours dedicated to UAP research and development and towards air traffic controllers, especially, as well as aircrew, that might make this whole subject a bit easier.
Mr. Bescond, do you think pilots and aviation personnel should be trained to respond to UAV?
The pilots, I'm not too sure, because that depends on their organization within the forces. I believe it would be nice not to, we can't speak of a training, really, but at least to make them aware that this exists. It's not a nothing. I mean, it does exist. Some people have spotted things that they can't explain, and they should be made aware that this can happen to them as well, and then trained to behave on if that happens. As was just said now, keep quiet, don't chase the object if you have passengers in the craft, this kind of things. Now, on the ground, I believe that controllers should be made much more aware than the pilots. That this can happen so that they can be of good support to the pilot and not ignore the thing if that happens. I think that's about it. And I believe I saw somewhere at one point that the New York firemen have this in their procedures. If they spot UFOs, they do have, so it's not training, but it's a directive. If they see something of this kind, what they should do. Firemen. So yes, summing up, I believe some, not exactly training, but at least a way of making people aware that this can exist and what should they, how should they behave if that happens.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
On that particular part, I would like to ask add a word. I think there is difference between pilots and controllers. That's true. At least having a training, delivering information first to report. Secondly, to create a sensitivity with the subject, like a course on meteo, clouds and so on. It's a phenomenon. Yeah. The problem is not to address that like a threat. For the air defense people and so on, well, I'm not the one to judge if it's a threat or not. That's not the matter. The point is to know that things are existing, how to behave in case of emergency, that sort of thing. Certainly, this is interesting and important, and making report, because all the reports from pilots and so on will help to investigate, to have more data, to react earlier, to gather data from sensors, radars, and so on, which is missing today. That's the point. I think it's education,
Yeah. I agree.
Historical parts proposed by Mr. Cahill. Do you think parts of the information should be also to say to them it's not a recent phenomena, it has been there for a long time?
Well, talking indicates, yes, most of the reports at least are recorded since the 40s, 50s in France. People are just discovering things, but in fact, we know that there were some recommendations to investigate made by the Ministry of Defense since the 50s, at least. So it's historical. It's not something hidden. We know the papers are existing and so on. So 50s to 2024, it makes a lot of decades. Now the point is that there is no urgency. However, the interest for the subject and so on could suggest to have probably more information, reasonable information, both to help to get some more information, more data, and that pilots, I think that what is happening, pilots are listening the radio or looking at the TV, so they see that the subject somewhere becomes more normal, and if things are normal, people can say, as a professional, I will make a report. It's just what I'm answering when I have the question, when I take a flight, I listen music, I read the book, sometimes I look at outside, but I'm not expecting to see a UFO. It might happen, but I mean, it's not my expectation, and it doesn't prevent from, from flying and flying quiet. That's the point.
I will further my point. Do you think it could be a task that could be given to the Free AF to create such a briefing document to share to pilots?
Well, it might become one task, and maybe we could. It could be, by the way, one task fulfilled by Japan or jointly or something we could imagine. Certainly, they are doing, as I said, some work with ENAC, which is a first step, but it has to be decided by authorities. I think that EEF can make conference what we are doing, explain to pilots what is the subject, but we have no role to deliver. We don't have any mandate to do that. What I mean.
We could make suggestions. Yeah.
Yes, we can make suggestion, of course. Recommendation.
Do we have Mr. Courtade online? No.
Yes. Okay. Well, I think that we are coming to the end of this webinar and of this roundtable, which is an incredible. We had good roundtables, good discussion. Yeah. But I have to say that I was expecting interesting debate. I didn't imagine so far it would be like this. I want to thank very warmly the participants to this roundtable. Thank you for having accepted to play the game, to participate. Of course, I would like to thank also all the other who participated to the preparation of the webinar and to the execution by the papers, by the roundtable. So SCU, Eduardo, of course, people from Sigma 2 and SUAPS, and well, the list is long, so we will write it, but sincerely, my warm regards and many thanks to you for this work. And I hope it will be successful when we deliver the records. For Ret or for Xavier, don't worry, everything is recorded, so you will have the entire session, even if you miss a little at the beginning. Don't worry. Sean, it was a pleasure to exchange with you. And well, I have no more comment. And this is webinar 2. There will be certainly a third one.
And thank you very much for the candidness you use when answering every question, even personal ones. It's really appreciated, and thank you very much for your time.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Merci Jean-Marc, merci à
Bye.
tous. Ray, and
À bientôt.
Bye, everybody.
we posted with the Jersey analysis and report, of course.
Merci. À bientôt.
Au revoir.